Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, or welcome for the first time if you're new here. I've been really busy this last week so I haven't had much time to do any modelling, but I did want to show you this fantastic new book that I've got from Wingleader Productions. This is Wingleader Photo Archive number 18. It focuses on the Avro Lancaster, and as you can see from the front cover here, this is part 3 in their Lancaster series. The first two parts focus on early war and late war Lancasters, Mark I and Mark III, while this book focuses on those slightly less common Lancaster marks, so the Mark II, the Mark Six, the Mark X, the Type 464, also known as the B.III Special or the Dambusters variant, and the B.1 Special, which was the Grand Slam and Tallboy variant. Now the reason I bought this kit in particular is because I'm a big fan of the Lancaster. I built a couple of versions already and I'd like to try to build each different version that's available. With that in mind, I've got a number of kits in the stash, starting with this Airfix Mark II, then moving on to the Airfix Dambusters, so this is the B.III Special version, and also including the Revel B.III Dambusters version. Why do I have two Dambusters versions? Well, because I've also got this 3D printed kit which I got from eBay to convert one of them into a Grand Slam version. So at some point in the future I'll be building those three Lancasters. So let's take a look inside the book. It's going to be quite difficult, I think, for you to see this on a double page spread, so I'm going to zoom in to individual pages. I did check with Simon over at Wingleader Productions to make sure he'd be happy for me to make a review of this book, because obviously I want to give you a look at the content of this book, but at the same time it's not good for me to make a full resolution, clear copy of every page of this book available on the internet for anyone to see, so I just ran that past Simon to make sure he was happy. So straight inside the front cover we move to the Lancaster Mark II. The Mark II is the version of the Lancaster which was powered by the Bristol Hercules engines rather than the Merlin engines, and they were really a bit of a insurance policy in case the supply of Merlin engines ran dry. So this first page here is a classic example of what you get in the Wingleader's book. Really high quality, lovely photo, and many of them are annotated with letters and arrows to point out key features to you. And many of these things I personally wouldn't have noticed without these annotations. So we can see there, for example, the marking A is the long carburettor intakes with the external ice guards, B is the original style oil coolers, and C is a second camera position which was later deleted. What you might also notice on this photo, and something that I didn't know about either, is the bulge bomb bay on this aircraft. And of course the underside of this aircraft looks much lighter than your standard RAF Knight. And of course the paint scheme on this aircraft looks a little bit different to the regular paint scheme. We'll come to why that is in a moment. But if we move across the page, again, I just love the detail in the text here, so straight away, you're only on page 3 and I've learned a lot already. One thing we'll notice here is the lack of exhaust staining on the wings. Apparently that's only really a common feature on the Merlin powered Lancasters. I never knew that. I suppose it's obvious, if you know it and you look at the photos, but it's one of those details that could really set your model apart. Moving across the page and we get a really good view here of that paint scheme with the low demarcation line and the light coloured underside. At first I thought this was a Lancaster in sky or medium grey undersides, but of course it's actually a prototype aircraft and therefore it has yellow undersides. So it just goes to show how difficult it can be to interpret a black and white photo. But also notice here something that's slightly unusual, which is the roundels on the underside of the wings. Normally we only see those on the top side. And of course these books are great for pointing out the details which kits might not include or might get wrong. So for example here we note that on the early Mark IIs in particular there are no spinners on the propellers. Now I know that looking inside my Mark II Airfix kit it does include spinners, which is not wrong because later versions did include them, but it's something you might want to think about if you're looking at a particular aircraft. And if you're thinking the top photo there looks slightly unusual, but you can't quite work out what it is, you'll notice we don't have a fairing there around the mid-upper turret. A gorgeous picture here on the next page of a Lancaster on hard standing somewhere, January 1943. Lovely photo, great inspiration for a diorama there. I love this photo here on page 8 with these really heavily weathered, worn looking Lancasters, and the text explains there that apparently these were originally painted in special night, but that paint weathered very badly and so was replaced by a better smooth night shade, and that accounts for the patchiness there on the paint job. I wonder if you could represent that in a model somehow with maybe I don't know, a bit of maybe a bit of XF69 NATO black mixed in with the black for one coat, and then a bit of sort of sponge chipping or hairspray chipping over the top, something like that maybe. Something worth thinking about. You can also see there on the tail planes, where the rudder joins the tail plane. There's quite a lot of wear around there as well. Looking over the page, and you can see here this wonderful picture of a Mark II, which does have those spinners which I talked about earlier, so this is presumably a later version. Spots a mixture of early and late Mark II features. I'm going to skip forward a few pages again here. You can see on this aircraft again we've got what appears to be new paintwork on the Bombay doors. I don't think it's weathering because the edges are quite square. It looks like it's sort of been painted with a paintbrush in a slightly different colour. And again, talk about little details here. We've got the aerials on the nose, and they are unpainted, so they are natural metal, I'm assuming. Something I never knew before. I've always painted the aerials night or black on my Lancasters, but it seems I might have been wrong to do that. Then on the facing page we have one of the common features of this book, which is the nice artwork representing a particular aircraft and some modeller's notes next to it. So in this version, for example, we've got what? We've got no fuselage windows. We've got the mandrel aerial under the nose, possibly unpainted. We've got an aerial under the rear turret for the Monica system. Early style bulge Bombay doors. No mid-under turret, so no underside turret there. They weren't particularly common on Lancasters anyway, I don't think. And no port observation blister. So that's the blistered windows on the cockpit side. And again, I didn't realise this, but apparently it's quite common to see the bulge on one side, on the starboard side, but not on the port side. I'm not quite sure why that is. Okay, let's move on to the next section of the book, which is the Lancaster Mark Six. If you've never heard of the Lancaster Mark Six, don't feel bad. I think a lot of people haven't. I hadn't either. But basically it was a version of the Lancaster used as an engine test bed. So the two-stage Merlin and the universal power plant were planned for the Avro Lincoln, and they were tested on some aircraft which were converted Mark IIIs. You can see here on this this wonderful head-on shot here just how different those engines look compared to the standard Lancaster engines, the Merlin engines. It's kind of strange, isn't it? It's still got the distinctive shape of a Lancaster, but something just doesn't look quite the same, and of course it is those engines. So of course it's quite unlikely that I'm going to build a Mark VI. I imagine there aren't many model Mark VIs out there, and I bet there's no kits. But I found this a really interesting reference section still, and there's lots of sort of variations. So there's a 4-propeller version here. We've got versions with the front turret that are faired off. We've got them faired off in different ways as well, I think. All kinds of sort of modifications and testing configurations. And again, if you did want to build one, there's that artwork there of ND673 from 653 Squadron. Moving on, and we have the Lancaster Mark X. Now this is basically the Canadian built version of the Lancaster. These were produced with North American made components and the Packard Merlin engines. Apart from that, I always assumed that they were basically identical to a Mark I or a Mark III, but of course there's plenty to learn in this book. I really like this inset picture here on the bottom left. You can just about see in the background the very distinctive tail of a B-17 wearing a RAF roundel. So that presumably, as it says in the text there, is a Coastal Command B-17 that's going to be taken from the States back to the UK by the crew who have just delivered this pattern aircraft to the States. Again, a great indication of the detail that's featured in this book here. That yellow arrow, I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell in the video what it's pointing to, but there is a aerial there going sort of diagonally from bottom left to top right near the mid-upper turret, and that is the aerial for the IFF, the Identification Friend or Foe system. Again, I've never seen that modelled on an aircraft. I didn't know it was there myself, but I've learnt something new. You can also see in this photo the unusual, or rather not very common, ventral turret installed directly beneath the mid-upper turret. I love this colour photo here of Lancaster KB712, a 419 squadron, and also the story that goes with it, because you might miss that just looking at the photo, but if you look carefully you can see that the port undercarriage is off the runway in the grass by the looks of it, or in the mud, having broken through the edge of the concrete track, and the pilot therefore is presumably trying to free that. Such a lovely photo, and again you can see all the staining there on the engines as well from the exhausts, especially on the starboard outer engine. You'll also notice from this top-down shot here that the engine staining doesn't occur from the outermost exhaust on the outer engines. So both the inner engines have two lots of exhaust staining, two streaks of exhaust staining, but the outer engines only have one on the side closest to the cockpit. And that's to do, I think, with just the aero and the angle of the wing there. You get the staining on the underside rather than the upper side of the wing. However, I didn't learn that from the book, I did just make it up, so I could be wrong. I love this picture here of the propeller being changed on this Mark X. And again, just such a small detail in the text here. It says that sometimes Canadian-built Lancasters, unlike their British-built counterparts, retained their stencils on the propeller blades. I never knew that British Lancasters didn't have those stencils. In fact, I could swear that on my HK 1/32 scale Lancaster, I've got those on the propeller. I need to check that out. But that would make such a great diorama, wouldn't it? Something like that. I'm not sure what kind of crane that is, but I'm sure you'll be able to get that kind of truck with a crane on the back. The scaffolding looks just like the versions you can get in the Airfix kit, so that would be a really great little diorama to make. And again at the end here we've got this representative artwork from Mark X, winter 1944. We've got the H2S dome on the underside, and you'll notice, I'm not sure if you can see it in the image, but the nose is painted in one type of black paint, whereas the rest of the body is painted in a slightly different paint. That's mentioned and shown a couple of times in this book, and it suggested that maybe there was an issue with the paint coming from Canadian-built Lancasters. It's not really quite clear why, but it is very distinctive in some of the photos. I seem to start my description of every page with, here's something I learnt, or here's another thing I didn't know, but it really is true. And here in this case, this yellow indicated sort of bar on the side, on the starboard side of the Lancaster, I did notice that actually when I built the Avro Lancaster for a client, that it had that piece included, a bit out of scale to be honest in the Avro kit. I didn't know what it was, but it's a modification, mod 971 cabin heating system intake. You'll also notice that by this time in the war we no longer have windows on the fuselage of the Lancaster. Okie dokie, moving on to the Type 464 provisioning, better known as the B.III Special, and maybe more well known as the Dambusters variant. Now I'm sure lots of us are familiar with Operation Chastise, the Dambusters, but still I found this section particularly interesting and particularly useful because of course I'm looking to build one Dambusters Lancaster, and I know that sometimes in both the Airfix and the Avro kits the details are not particularly entirely correct. So the first part of this section deals with the prototype Type 464s. And again, straight away some useful notes. So we mentioned in the previous section that there are no windows on the later version of the Lancasters, but in fact it says here that all the Type 464s did have fuselage windows. And they had, as you can see in the image here, the needle blade propellers. A really useful, very tiny detail that's pointed out here, which could really make your aircraft stand out and give it that extra bit of authenticity, is what's labelled C here next to the cockpit. So that's a scrape in the paint, and it's common apparently to the Dambusters aircraft because there is a cable that runs out of the cockpit down to the upkeep mine. That cable is used to arm the self-destruct for the mine, in case there's some kind of malfunction with it, and literally just runs up the side into the cockpit, as I said, so scrapes against the fuselage side and removes the paint. What a cool little detail they've pointed out there. I also love the fact that we don't just deal with the Dambusters aircraft themselves, but also, as I said, the earlier versions, the prototype versions of them, and even the prototype version of the upkeep mine. So in the top left here you can see the mine with a wooden case. It looks like a giant beer barrel or something. They later found that to be ineffective, and so they removed it, and that gave us the mine you can see in the bottom picture there. There's also a discussion about the colour of the mine. So we've got a recovered mine here being viewed by the Germans, and it's pointed out that the mine was either painted red oxide, that's to be the primer colour, or black. I've skipped a few pages here, but looking at the artwork for the 464, you'll notice it says that we have the large bomb aimer's blister. That's included in both the Revell and the Airfix kit. However, I do need to read this section again more carefully, because I don't believe that the Dambusters use the standard bomb sight, and I believe looking at the kit instructions, both Airfix and Revell include their standard Mark I, Mark II Lancaster bomb sight in their Dambusters variant. So that's something I need to look into more carefully. I'm sure the answer will be somewhere in this book, but I think that's a good example of something that maybe the model kit manufacturers don't necessarily get right. The other thing I found really interesting was the removal of the mid-upper turret. One thing to bear in mind here is that we still do have the front turret on the B.III Special, the Dambusters version. It's only the mid-upper turret that has been removed. It also surprised me to see just how hasty the repair job, or the paint job rather, was to the top of the Lancaster where that turret had been removed. And it mentions here in the text that this was sometimes just a doped linen cover. So again, perhaps that's something I could include on one of these models, just to give it that bit of distinction. You've got to be careful with things like that, haven't you? Sometimes they look great, they look realistic, and they make your model stand out in a good way, and other times they make it just look like it's a badly prepared, badly painted model. It's like when you're trying to paint on a tank the hand-applied winter camouflage, and it's hard to do it and make it look hand-applied. It's easy to make it look like you just did a bad job painting your model. Next up is the B.1 Special, which is similar in many ways to the B.III Special, but also has some key differences. And this was designed to carry the Tallboy and Grand Slam bombs. Huge bombs. I forget the exact weight of them now, but they're the largest bombs that were carried by Allied aircraft. And as a result, just like the Dambusters aircraft, they needed to reduce the weight significantly on the Lancasters that carried them. Now I believe that this first picture here is not really representative of a typical B.1 Special, because it has the front turret, although it appears not to have any armament in there. It appears to have the glass but not the armament, and it has a mid-upper turret. And I don't think that was typical for B.1 Specials. I'm not saying the book is wrong or anything like that, it goes on to cover the more typical modifications later on. So yes, here we can see on the right hand page here we've got the production B.1 Specials, and you can see again we've got the front turret is now faired over completely. We've got the deeper bomb aimer's blister on the bomb aimer's position, and that was needed because the bomb sight which was used for the Tallboy and the Grand Slam was far bigger than the standard bomb sight and only just fits in to that area. I'm not sure what I'm going to do when I come to build my Grand Slam conversion, because I don't have a part for that bomb sight, so I have to work on that. The other thing to note here is that the B.1 Special has a stronger undercarriage. I know that the Mark III Dambusters version had a stronger undercarriage as well. I don't know if this B.1 Special has an even stronger one, or it has the same one as the Dambusters version, so I need to check that. I know the Airfix kits do include the Dambusters undercarriage, so I should be okay to use that if indeed they have the same version. You can see here in this shot what I meant by the crude removal of the mid-upper turret. It almost looks like there's like a roundel on top of the fuselage or something there, doesn't it? But it is just the covering up of that former turret space. Some lovely detail shots here of the Grand Slam. And you'll notice that that bomb is far from clean. It's got some scrapes on it from the carrying mechanism, and it is just a bit dirty and weathered itself too. The other thing that you'll notice, and I'll cover this in a moment on the next page, is that the camouflage scheme comes down there to the top of the bomb bay, and the underside of the wing is definitely not night or black. So there are some great details here in this quite famous picture of 3 Lancasters flying together. So we've got the aircraft nearest to us is a standard Lancaster. The mid and the far one are both B.1 Specials. And you'll notice a couple of interesting things here. Notice that the tail planes on the Specials are camouflaged, both inside and outside on the middle aircraft, and only on the inside on the far aircraft. That apparently is an identification thing. Apparently they tried various patterns on the outside of the tail planes, including a split black and white pattern for aircraft recognition. So quite a few options there in terms of paint variations if you're painting a Grand Slam. And of course you can see the low demarcation, the camouflage coming all the way down the sides compared to the standard camo. And it does appear that some of the B.1 Specials had night undersides and some had a medium grey underside. So again, a good opportunity to build a Lancaster that stands out from the crowd. And there we go, we can see that split colour tail plane there in the artwork, and in fact in the reference photo just below it. I do like these modeler notes down here as well, because I suspect that these would not be picked up by the instructions in a typical kit. So for example, we can see that we've got no Lorenz towel rail, which is the aerial at the bottom, I think it's on the port side of the aircraft, but it's not on the Specials. Again, no port observation blister, but presumably a starboard one. Taller astrodome, and we've got the T-shaped radio altimeter aerials under the tailplane. They were added, I believe, even to the Dambusters aircraft. I feel like a Dambusters aircraft was lost, because of course the Dambusters flew very, very low, and one of them was lost in practice, and they fitted an American radio altimeter, I believe. I've read that somewhere. Don't quote me on that, but I'm sure I've read that somewhere. And as we move towards the end of the book, we end with this lovely picture of this Mark II Canadian squadron aircraft being bombed up somewhere in Yorkshire. I love the details here, such as the covers there over the wheels, the tyres. Fantastic photo. And there we go, there's the back of the book there with the ISBN. And the recommended retail price of $19.95. An absolute bargain for this book, honestly guys. You know, I paid for this book with my own money, and I'm definitely going to buy some more in the series. It's an absolutely fantastic book. Loads of great photos I've never seen before. Loads of great information, and all those arrows and letters pointing out those small details that I just didn't know until I looked in this book. When I first got the book, I read it cover to cover. And to be honest, I probably need to read it cover to cover again. I'm sure there'll be lots of extra things that I missed the first time around. It's going to be a fantastic reference for anyone wanting to build any of the Lancasters featured here. I got mine direct from Wingleader Productions. It was really well packaged when it arrived as well, which I appreciate a lot. Nice firm packaging so it won't get bent or damaged in any way in the post. And wrapped in a nice waterproof outside wrapper as well. As I said at the beginning, this is number 18 in the Photo Archive series. So Wingleader do have a huge range of books available. We can see some of them here. We've got various marks of the Spitfire, the Whirlwind, the Mosquito, Typhoon, other books on the Lancasters, the Gladiator, all kinds of fantastic looking books here. And as far as I'm aware, all the same price of $19.95. If you click on the titles, all of them include sample pages like this. So this is the early Lancaster marks. It's quite rare you get that these days. I think this is really, really helpful. Look at this fantastic picture here of this Lancaster being bombed up with cookies. Well, it'll be one cookie for that Lancaster, so I'm guessing there's some more somewhere out of frame. That would make a great diorama as well, wouldn't it? That Lancaster there in the Wings for Victory pose, probably, I don't know, somewhere in London, I'm guessing, trying to stir up finance for the war effort. And then this Irk here painting the code letters on the side in colour. And if there are colour photos in these books, I do believe they're all original colour. There are no colourised images as far as I'm aware. So there we go, guys. That was my look at the Wingleader's production Lancaster book. So what can I say? Highly recommended if you are into your Lancasters, and I'm sure the other books in the series will be just as good as well. I'm sure I could quite easily spend a few £100s on their website, but I might just go for the earlier Lancaster books for now. If you're into any of the aircraft here, I would definitely recommend you check them out. And all that remains for me to say is thank you to you for watching, and special thanks to my YouTube members and Patreon supporters, without whom this channel would not be possible. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and until next time, have fun modelling.